Jollof rice has one major problem, and it's that I haven't been eating it my whole life. More of a me problem than a jollof problem, if I'm totally honest. The West African staple has all of the hallmarks of a top-tier comfort food. It's spicy, it's carby, and it's worth all of the hype. Today I'm going to show you the techniques you need to master when it comes to nailing jollof rice, and I'm going to pair it with some really flavorful suya and fried plantains for a little sweetness. This is comfort food at its best. To get really delicious jollof, you need two things. You need to nail the stew, and you need to get rice that's perfectly cooked without being gummy. I'll start with the stew, a super flavorful mix of red pepper, sweetness from tomatoes, and spice from chilies. To a blender, add 5 tomatoes. If they're really little, go ahead and go with 6. That's what I did here. I like to add these first as they release a lot of water, and it just makes it easier to blend. Add in 2 red bell peppers, 1 whole red onion, 2 habanero peppers, 3 cloves of garlic, and a large knob of ginger. Now, Scotch bonnets would be classic for this, but I still just can't find them anywhere at any stores in my area, so I always have to use habanero. Use 2 if you want some good spice, but you can use 1 if you only want a little heat. I would say don't leave these out though, spice is very important here. Once smooth, this is our base stew ready to go. If this looks light, it's because there's a ton of water from the raw veggies that we need to cook out later before this is really ready to go. With our fragrant stew prepped, let's talk rice. If we want the perfect texture that jollof is all about, parboiled rice is the classic choice. The granules soak up a ton of flavor, but they hold a distinct, firm, separate texture. This isn't like sushi rice where they all stick together. These have been pre-cooked, so the grains of rice don't stick together when steamed. Weigh out 600 grams or about 3 cups of rice and wash it profusely. Like way more than you would think. The water needs to be really clear. Honestly, this took me like 5 minutes of washing almost. If your jollof ends up gummy, this is probably where you went wrong. The last bit of prep is just gonna be a diced red onion, but you can just easily run your knife through it to get that. With that all prepped, we're ready to start this jollof. It's gonna have a few stages of cooking before it's that deep red, beautiful rice you're looking for. In a Dutch oven over medium, begin frying your red onion in a little bit of olive oil. The goal here is to get them slightly browned and nicely softened. Not quite super caramelized, but very close. This is about the level that we want them to be at. Now we can squeeze an entire tube of tomato paste into the onions and begin frying that alongside them. We're gonna deepen the color here, which is gonna cook out that raw, acidic, almost sour tomato flavor from the paste. Add in all the stew that we blended earlier, and then season this now with thyme, curry powder, and a few bay leaves. We need a lot of salt here along with chicken powder, which is, I've talked about this before, it's basically like salty chicken MSG bouillon. We can't add the rice just yet as this is just a raw stew. It's basically got no flavor, it's just vegetables. We need to cook this and reduce it. This is kind of the same thing you'd want to do with a good curry. We want to cook this down until the oil starts to separate out. You're gonna see little bits of oil pulling at the top, and that's how you know it's been cooked far enough. Bring this to a simmer and cook it on low, medium, low for about 30 minutes. The bubbling here can get a little bit aggressive, so just watch out for little like pops and explosions. That way you don't cover your kitchen in tons of sauce. I end up putting the lid about halfway on so I don't have to deep clean my kitchen afterwards. Stir this regularly, probably every few minutes or so to keep the bottom from burning as the water cooks out of the vegetables in the stew. This really is so insanely important for good jollof. The flavor you get from cooking out the stew is unmatched. You really can't get it any other way. This is about right where we want it to be. For me, this took 35 minutes or so over medium-low. The color is way darker, the flavors are much better, and your taste buds are gonna thank you. Now we can add our washed rice along with roughly 300 grams of chicken stock, maybe 400 grams depending on how much your stew is cooked out. Really, you need to make sure that your rice is covered with just enough, like a little bit of water. You'll be able to see rice when you stir it. You don't want this like fully swimming and just with a ton of water, so go based on the vessel size and how much your stew is cooked out. If you add too much water here, you're gonna end up with a gummy, soggy mess, so I would say err on the side of less water. We can always add a little bit more if we really need to and our rice is undercooked. At this point, bring it up to a simmer and then turn the heat down to low and cover the pot. The lid has to be tight fitting, so use the lid that came with the pot. You don't want any steam getting out or the rice won't be fully cooked. 30 minutes should be enough time for the rice to absorb the spicy aromatic flavors we worked so hard to develop. You have to resist every bone in your body telling you to open this. Please, if you open it, you're gonna lose the steam and the rice is gonna take much longer to cook. While the rice steams away, let's turn to the suya, a well-spiced Nigerian skewer that utilizes a crazy delicious coating. This coating, called Yaji Spice, is a combination of peppers, ginger, garlic, and crushed peanuts. The peanuts bring a ton of texture and savory flavor when they're charred. It's absolutely my new favorite way to season anything, and we use this a lot now. In a food processor or mortar and pestle, blitz together 50 grams of unsalted roasted peanuts, 4 grams of smoked paprika, 2 grams of cayenne, 3.5 grams of onion powder, 3.5 grams of garlic powder, 1.5 grams of ground ginger, and 5 grams of that same chicken powder I used in the jollof. Pinch of clove, and then about 15 turns of black pepper or so. You don't really need to measure that, but that's about how much I do. I do want to note this is a good amount of cayenne. It's pretty decently spicy. If somebody doesn't like hot food, you're gonna probably want to do about 1 gram of cayenne instead. This should be very fine, but don't let this like rip too long in a food processor or you run the potential of turning it into peanut butter. Eventually the oil's gonna start splitting out of the peanuts and you don't want that. This sort of sandy texture here is gonna be perfect to coat the meat in. Speaking of meat, suya would traditionally be beef, but chicken is an option as well, and this works perfectly with chicken thigh, so that's what I've been using. The texture ends up juicy and a little crunchy by the time we're done with it. This is about 1.5 pounds or so of boneless, skinless chicken thigh, perfect for broiling. Slice these into thin pieces and remove any excess fat or veins from the chicken. Thigh meat has the right amount of fat for high heat cooking. We can take these till they're nice and brown without worrying about dry chicken in the end. Season these with salt and oil now. Though our yaji has some chicken powder in it and that's got salt, the chicken itself needs to be seasoned. If you've got bamboo skewers, be sure to soak them first so they don't burn, probably like 20-30 minutes. If you've got metal ones, don't worry about that. The best way to get your yaji covering the chicken is to just dump it in the bowl that you've got it seasoned in and then toss them around with your hands until they're covered. From there, skewer the chicken, but leave a little bit of space around each piece for airflow. I kind of packed them too tightly here, trying to fit all of the chicken on, so just learn from that. Place this on a sheet tray with a rack, and this can go under a low broiler for about 20 minutes. Be sure to flip the skewers every few minutes or so just so that the peanuts don't burn. You're looking for like really nice dark toasty coloring, but again, not too burnt. The peanuts can handle a little bit of burning, honestly. Like you don't want them, of course, like burnt. It doesn't taste super dark, even if there is a little bit of that dark color on them. So just be aware, if you get a little bit of that dark color, don't worry about it. It's not too far. By the time you're finishing these, the jollof should almost be ready. At the 30-minute mark, shut off the heat and just let this sit. It needs about 10 more minutes with the lid on for the steam to finish the rice to a perfectly fluffy texture. With this sufficiently steamed, it's time for the moment of truth. Is the bottom burnt? Is the rice gummy? This is where all of that waiting really pays off. It's a perfect pot of jollof. The bottom should have a little bit of dark color, but not too much, or that's gonna bring some burnt flavor. If you want more of that crunchy dark rice, you can turn the heat up to medium and fry it for a minute or two before fluffing the rice. Keep your nose out for burnt smells. If you smell anything start to burn, that's when you're gonna wanna take it off the heat immediately. The color should be this like deep reddish orange, and the flavor should blow you away with each bite. It's really good. Last thing before we can tuck in are some fried plantains. These are super easy to make. I covered this in my bear video, but the sweetness helps tone down and balance the spice of everything going on. Take like 2 to 3 ripe plantains and slice them into coins on the bias. Get a skillet with enough oil to coat the bottom, heating over medium. You'll know it's hot enough when you can see bubbles form on the plantains when you put them in. Gently slide in your plantains and be sure not to stick them to each other. This is roughly 2 to 3 minutes aside to turn that beautiful golden caramel color. Flip these once they've taken on some color and they're crunchy, and then get them caramelized on the other side as well. These honestly weren't as ripe as I like, but that's okay. There's nothing I can do about what the grocery store carries. There you have it, caramelized plantains for when you need a relief from all the heat in the suya and the jollof. This is the kind of comfort meal that feels like home no matter where you're from. When I think about connecting with other people, my sort of default is connecting through food. I think it's so important to show respect and love to others in the way that we honor dishes and flavors. I really hope I did right by Nigeria with this one. Massive shout out to the amazing people supporting me directly on Patreon through patreon.com/CameronMarty. They get some cool benefits for supporting the channel, and I get to keep making videos like this, so check it out and consider becoming a patron. Another way you can support the channel is just by liking and subscribing if you enjoy this type of video. It helps YouTube know that you want to see more of it. Now, if you're craving some perfectly fluffy, light apple cider donuts, go ahead and check out this video that I made a couple weeks ago. I think you're really gonna enjoy that one. Thanks so much again for watching. Cheers.